Alright guys, let's get started today. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. So first I want 5 people to tell me what they did for self-care. Okay. Nice, nice. And why did that feel like it was self-care for you? Okay. You're able to just kind of decompress, unplug. Nice, nice. Yes. Ooh, nice, wonderful, wonderful. Very good. And so you took time for yourself. Nice, nice. Eating breakfast counts? Absolutely, I will take it, I will take it. Nice. Good, okay, good. And again, tell me how you knew that was self-care. How'd that make you feel? Okay. Okay, great. Nice, wonderful. One more. Mm-hmm. Okay, that works too. That works too. Wonderful. Good. Good. Well, we're going to start today. A brief overview of trauma, what we've talked about before. So in your reading, you had big T versus little t trauma. Who could give me an example of what universally little t trauma is? Okay. Failing a test. Good. Good. And why would that be little trauma to you? Okay. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So you'd be anxious about it, you'd be worried about your grade, but you'd be able to talk to your friends about it, or your mom or dad, or other support systems, and you'd be able to work through that. Good. Wonderful. Another example of little t trauma. Little t trauma. Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. So your mom forgot to pick you up from your basketball practice when you were in high school. Okay. And why was that little t trauma to you? You were worried, anxious, couldn't reach her on her cell phone. Good. Good. Excellent. Well, what about examples of big T trauma? Mm-hmm. Okay, a big car crash. A big car crash. And why would that be a big T trauma? Nice. So you feel it in your body, you might have some physical lasting effects, you might be nervous to get back behind the wheel, could be something that hurt others as well as yourself, significant impact in the vehicle so you might not be able to get around. Good, absolutely. Another example of big T trauma. Yes. Interpersonal assault, sexual assault, physical assault, things of that nature. Absolutely, absolutely. So let's list them on the board here. So we've got little t and we've got big T. So little t we said failed test. And big T we had car crash. Little t we said mom didn't pick up. And big T we had personal assault. Or rape. Or physical. So rape or physical assault. So tell me, does everybody believe failed test is a little t? I have some hands yes, some hands no. So tell me why not? Why is that not necessarily always a little t? Good, yes. So you may have failed, let's say your ACT or your SAT. Applying to grad school, need to take some tests, and you failed it. Totally bombed it. And now it's set in motion this event. This anxiety about your future, this anxiety about what am I going to do now? I can't get into grad school, I don't have the grades for a scholarship. I don't have the family support to support me financially. This may turn out to be a very big T. It can set you up for having high anxiety for when you have to take job interviews, when you have to take any future tests, when you have anything that's going to challenge your intelligence or challenge your skills to be able to reach the next level. You may have extreme anxiety, panic attacks, inability to sleep, racing heart, things of that nature. So long-term lasting effects, they could actually bump this over to a big T for some people. What about mom didn't pick up from practice? Everybody think that's a little T? Why not? Good, yes. Let's say that it's a pattern. Let's say the first time she doesn't pick you up. Okay, she got distracted. It was unfortunate. She was late, but she came, she got you, everything was good. You talked about it, you set up a system and a plan, you feel safe, you know it's not going to happen again. But what if it does happen again? What if it happens over and over and over again? And that sense of security, that sense of safety, that sense of I can count on my parent diminishes. And that level of insidious trauma and disappointment creates a rift in attachment. And then that can be a significant big T trauma, because then what does that do? That sets you up for future relationships. Not trusting other individuals romantically or friendships-wise, distancing yourself, avoiding those intimate attachments because you're afraid of not getting your needs met. We'll talk more about Bowlby and his attachment theory next week, but we'll touch on that just a little bit here. Good. Good. Point of this is that trauma is individually experienced. It is not the event, but it's our reaction to the event. It's not something that happens to us, but something that happens within us. You could be working with a client and it could be a new client, they come in and they are just in tears. And you say, oh my goodness, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. And the client says, Dr. J, my goldfish died this morning. And in my head, my personal head, not my therapist hat, my personal hat, I'm thinking, okay, well, I just got 3 goldfish for my daughters, and my wife ended up having to flush them down the toilet 2 days later because they died. But the reaction was very different than what I'm seeing here. So you dig a little bit deeper, and you say, well, tell me why that's so hard for you. Tell me what's going on. What's beyond that? What's behind that? And I said, Dr. J, I got that goldfish a month ago at the fair with my grandma. And then she died 3 days later. I say, okay. And I'm starting to put the pieces together and saying, so that was the last real stronghold that you had to your grandmother. It was a reminder of that loss that you had. And that loss that you had might have been that singular big T event, and now you're having other events, and your brain is using its spidey senses and saying, this reminds me of something that happened to me before that was extremely painful. And so your reaction is of such. Your reaction is of if your grandma just died. It is that extreme trauma and traumatic reaction internally, because your brain doesn't know the difference necessarily. It says, this happened to me, reminds me of this that happened to me, and that just completely gutted me. So that is something that you need to be aware of, is that trauma can happen individually, and it might not necessarily make sense to us right off the bat, but it doesn't have to make sense to us right off the bat. What matters is how that individual is internalizing it and how that individual is experiencing it. We're all very different, and it comes from a lot of different reasons. We can have a reaction to trauma for many different reasons. It could be internal resources that we have, feelings of confidence, feelings of safety and security, feelings of self-confidence within ourselves, our abilities to manage stress. It can come from external resources, your support system. Like if you got into a car crash, you were able to call for help. Your family met you at the hospital. You were able to get adequate, quick medical care. You were able to get time off of work that was paid. That would be a very different reaction necessarily, a very different experience than an individual who got into a terrible car accident, didn't have a support system, didn't have the financial capacity to buy a new vehicle, didn't have insurance, had no one to meet them at the hospital, didn't have paid time off. So when that individual gets back into a car and potentially crashes or skids on some black ice, their reaction internally is going to be much different than an individual that has a lot more resources and a lot more supports and a lot more resilience. Every individual is different. It's important to pay attention to when you're working with clients. When those feelings of safety, those feelings of being able to process through that can allow us to have a healthy traumatic coping experience or potentially develop PTSD, in a very traumatic reaction. Let's talk about why that is. The neurobiology of the brain is a fascinating thing and is experienced from the bottom up, meaning our retinas, we see what's happening, sends a message to the brainstem of danger, and it signals the periaqueductal gray that activates the sympathetic nervous system. And that increases our heart rate, that increases our blood pressure, that increases the blood flow to our muscles. And it enables us to run away or to fight. It's that classic fight or flight response. However, trauma arises and the symptoms of PTSD arise when our autonomic nervous system goes out of whack. When the powerful forces of fight or flight or freeze or submit are not allowed to go through that whole cycle of activation and healthy deactivation. And that survival energy is instead trapped in a body memory. It gets stuck. And when it gets stuck, it is easily accessible for smaller, seemingly disproportionate triggers. Because our body and our brain don't process trauma, memories the same way that other memories are processed. I may go out to lunch with a friend, have a great lunch, go home, and that memory is processed in an area of my brain that says that happened earlier today, or 2 weeks from now it happened 2 weeks ago. However, traumatic memory is processed much differently. It stays on the surface. And why does it stay on the surface? It stays on the surface because it needs to be easily accessible to allow us to continue to survive. Back in the olden days, we are face to face with a saber-toothed tiger. And our body responds. Remember, our retinas then signal that gray matter, which signals our autonomic nervous system to kick into our sympathetic nervous system into high gear, and we're ready to run away. Before we even think, before we even are able to identify that as a saber-toothed tiger, before we're able to identify a clear path of escape, before we're able to do anything, we are moving. Why is that? Because it keeps us alive. If we stayed and we thought, we're like, oh, that's a saber-toothed tiger, I should probably run. Those things are really hungry looking. I think there's a cave over there, or I could use this here rock as a weapon. By the time that happens, and that rational thought process happens, we're dead. So, when we remember that happening, initially, when that saber-toothed tiger's there, we see it, our gray matter kicks into high gear, sympathetic nervous system pumps blood to our muscles, and we're out of there. That sits right on the surface and waits for our amygdala, which is a tiny little piece of your brain that scans the environment for danger and connects it to memories of safety or lack of safety. When that amygdala says, oh my goodness, I remember this guy, he's dangerous, scared, run, get out of there, fight, whatever you have to do. It doesn't process through this frontal cortex of our brain, which is the rational thinking portion. In fact, that portion shuts off almost completely and just allows us to react in a very fight, flight, flee, submit way to protect ourselves. So when those memories are right on the surface there, it's helpful for us to survive. However, it can also be really detrimental to us when that threat is gone. The threat is gone, there's no saber-toothed tiger anymore. He's run off in the other direction. 6 months later, we're hanging out in the cave, and all of a sudden, we hear a growl. And what does our body do? Because of that memory of traumatic memory, of fear and certain death, is right on the surface of our memory, we cower in a corner, or we run out of the cave, or we do something that is very reactive because our amygdala has said, that's a scary noise. I remember when that was connected to something that was going to eat me, and I need to get out of here because I need to survive. Now, we didn't think about what was going on, the fact that it was dinner time, and our buddies over here, stomach was growling. And that's the noise that we heard. We were already too busy reacting and out of the cave. So a lot of those reactions that individuals have, especially with PTSD, can be extremely disproportionate to individuals who are not remembering those traumatic memories the way that same person is. Okay? When I hear someone's stomach growling, I hear someone's stomach growling. When someone has been attacked by a saber-toothed tiger and they hear a growling noise, they're running out of the cave and screaming. But very, very different. So let's go through a PowerPoint real quick where we can see this. Let's say, for example, a baby zebra, a lion threatens a baby zebra and their mother. Both run, because that is their automatic response. Both run from the lion, but the mom is too fast and the baby is left behind. So we already have flight, right? The baby zebra is pounced on by the lion, and baby zebra fights to get away. The lion has overpowered the zebra, and the baby zebra goes into freeze mode, which is really the only, I might still get out alive response. Okay? You see this a lot with like deer in the headlights. If I hold real still, then maybe they won't see me, maybe they won't eat me. Unfortunately, the lion is still there, and so the zebra resolved that it is going to get killed, and therefore goes into a submit state. A submit state is at the far end of the polyvagal reactions. We're going into sympathetic nervous system state 1, 2, 3, and now this goes back into a parasympathetic nervous system response. So this is where your body slows down instead of being very, very active, muscles, blood flow into muscles, breathing is incredibly fast, heart rate is incredibly fast because you are ready to run or fight or freeze. Now, instead of that, we're going into submit mode. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks back in and your body starts to shut down. It shuts down because it is expecting a certain pain of death. Okay? It's slower heart rate, flaccid body, significantly lower blood pressure, and digestion stops completely. Now perhaps it is the zebra's lucky day, and the zebra is able to, the lion becomes distracted prior to eating the zebra, and the zebra is able to escape and run away. And once in this safe place, the threat is no longer present, the zebra is able to shake off that remaining survival energy by trembling and twitching all over, and then the zebra's body returns to a very calm, sympathetic, parasympathetic 2 state, which is where we kind of exist on a regular basis. Now that's the normal processing of a survival response. However, let's take an example and compare that zebra to a child. So let's say a parent or caregiver threatens a child, and the flight response kicks in. The child's heart starts to beat faster, wants to run away. Again, those muscles are getting more blood pumped to them. The sympathetic nervous system is activated, and the body changes to react to that danger. However, if the child is not able to run away, their survival response is incomplete. They can't go through the full cycle and de-escalate. Instead, their instructions of flight remain in that nervous system, stuck there. Let's say the child is attacked verbally and physically, or sexually or emotionally, and the child's fight response is activated. That sympathetic nervous system, again, continues to be activated, body continues to change to react to danger. However, this child is overpowered by this caregiver. And their survival response, again, is incomplete, and those instructions to fight still stuck in the nervous system. Child was unable to run away. Child was unable to fight. So therefore goes into a freeze state. The child is rigid, heart is racing, hyperventilating. They possibly urinate or defecate. They are terrified. This hyper-freeze state is intended to be time limited. It is putting the body into a panic state, but it's supposed to just be for a minute. It's not supposed to be long-term. Just a minute until a threat passes, and then it's supposed to be able to de-escalate. But if it doesn't pass, the body then can go into what's called a hypofreeze. And that hypofreeze state, or submit state, is where the sympathetic nervous system hits the wall and is just now shutting down. The entire body is shutting down. The child becomes flaccid, heart rate slows, dissociation is present, pain and death is imminent. Long-term, it's only supposed to be short-term, but long-term, more and more energy is trapped in this stage. The child can vary between a reactive submit, like above, or the proactive submit, where the child walks on eggshells and people pleases to avoid that harm, which they know is very, very possible. The bottom line, the child cannot escape their day-to-day. With this impending terror, with this fear of pain, as a child is dependent on its caregivers for survival, there's no escape. There's no safe place. The threat of violence and neglect remains and continues pervasively, and therefore that altered physiology, again meant to be very short-term, remains long-term. This causes the child to continue to present in a hyper-reactive state, displaying those characteristics of fight, flight, freeze, or submit. Those very small triggers that we might think are small, again, send that child into an extreme reaction that we may see as disproportionate. But because all of this energy is stored in that limbic system, and those memories are right on the surface, all it takes is one small trigger and that child is ready to fight because they are afraid of death. They are in complete terror mode. You can also see this with panic attacks, hypervigilance, bedwetting, anger outbursts, social withdrawal, spacing out, and dissociation, depression, digestive issues. If your body is consistently starting and stopping your digestion because you're alternating between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous responses, that digestion system is just going to continue to go on, off, on, off, on, off. And you can only imagine how that's going to affect long term. These symptoms can occur when any threat of harm is perceived, even again, like that's if that threat is disproportionate. This is because the limbic system continues to believe that that body is in danger of pain or death and reacts accordingly. It does not know time. There is no here and now. There is no I'm in this room, in this place, in this safe place with Professor J talking to me about trauma. No, it is I have a trigger, I have a response. I am way back when that happened, and I am in danger, and I'm going to die if I don't get out of here, if I don't fight, if I don't freeze. There's no rational processing. There's no executive functioning. That frontal cortex is not even a part of the process. Only the limbic system and the body memory of that terror and that bodily reaction that follows. Okay? So think about when we were talking about a boy who was raised as a dog, you're talking about Sally and Sally's trigger responses. When she comes in to see Dr. Perry, we know that she was attacked, that her mother was killed in front of her, and that Sally's throat was cut, but she was able to survive. And she was placed with foster parents who didn't know a lot about her, just that she had very significant reactions to three things. Milk, the doorbell ring, and the phrase, "it's for your own good." And it took a little while, but Dr. Perry was able to find more and more out about this, but the parents would say, we tried to have friends come over, ring the doorbell, and try to get her used to knowing that it's going to be okay, that they're safe people. But every time she runs and she hides and it's getting worse. And we tried to give her chocolate milk or strawberry milk or alternative milk options, but every time she'll throw up or she'll cry or she'll try to fight us. And so Dr. Perry digs and digs and digs and tries to make a safe environment for Sally so that he can work with her. And he finds out that the man that broke into their house rang the doorbell before entering and subsequently killing her mother. And when he came up to Sally, right before he slit her throat, he said, "This is for your own good, kid," and then slit her throat. So that phrase is very, very triggering. And Sally, while she was laying there with her mom for 2 days before she was found, her throat was very, very sore, obviously, because it was cut. And she tried to drink milk to soothe her sore throat, but instead that milk just seeped out of her wound and commingled with the blood that was on her shirt already. So any milk relation, any ringing of the doorbell, or any use of that phrase are going to trigger that automatic response of the limbic system, because it cannot separate the fact that she is safe 6 months from now. She thinks she is back there in that tiny apartment with that mom and that she's going to die. So every time, instead of using exposure therapy, as parents are trying to do, to desensitize Sally to milk or the doorbell ringing, all it's doing is flooding that limbic system over and over and over again. All it's doing is not validating the sense of nurturing and safety. She's supposed to be safe with this foster family. Instead, her body is saying, "I don't feel safe," by acting out in these ways, and her foster parents are saying, "But it's for your own good," which again, trigger word, right? Her parents are saying, "Just try it, Sally, just try it. We're going to have somebody ring the doorbell and you can do it." But all it's doing is flooding that, because again, the frontal cortex is not online. She can think, "I'm safe." She can know the people at the door. She can know that she's in this room. But the minute that trigger happens, that body response kicks in. And she can't think her way out of it, because there is no timeline for a trauma memory. It is right there, it is right then, and you're in danger, you're going to be in pain, or you're going to die. And so her reaction reflects that. So I want you to break into small groups. I want you to talk about Leon and his attachment issues, and remember our big T, little t discussion about being left at the practice, and how Leon's mom continuously left him alone when he was an infant or with other caregivers that he did not know, and how that might affect his attachment. And then these 4 groups, I want you to talk about Raven and her dissociation, and how that might be a parasympathetic nervous system response related to those trauma triggers. Okay? Give about 10 minutes.